Hi, Ron.
Hi, morning.
Morning.
How are you
It's like
doing?
morning for both of us. I'm here with Ron Yap, who is a writer, advocate, and for mental health, which is very important now. And you're in Singapore.
Indeed, I am.
Can you tell me a bit more about yourself? How did you end up in this area?
Right, got it. So it's a funny story that I like to tell people that I put it quite openly on my page that I have OCD, OCD anxiety. And I guess the reason why I suspected that I had OCD in the first place, because for many years I had issues or I had symptoms, but I never in my mind ever thought that I could have OCD, was that actually I saw a post about OCD symptoms on my Instagram Explore page. Then I was like thinking, oh, this sounds a bit like me. Yeah, so that's what kickstarted my whole kind of journey into recovery, into getting a diagnosis from my therapist. In fact, right now I'm still going for therapy. So kind of what I realized at that point in time was that social media had this power, and this power to kind of raise awareness and give advocacy to people who maybe even have not considered that they might have mental health issues or mental health conditions. So that's why I started the page Mental Health CEO that I'm running right now. So it's a page dedicated to destigmatizing mental illnesses, raising awareness for mental health conditions, and also giving maybe some self-help tips along the way. Yep. So that's my story in a nutshell.
So, what's the full term to OCD for people who don't know what OCD is? Because
Ah,
OCD is
yes.
the abbreviation.
Yeah. So, okay. So OCD actually means obsessive compulsive disorder. So a lot of people think of it as a very stereotypical, oh, I wash hands too many times, or I wash my laundry too many times. When in reality, OCD can be about anything. Yeah. So for example, I know someone who can only eat food in a certain way. Otherwise, she'll puke it all out. Um, so there's a few parts to OCD, right? So OCD, the O stands for obsession, where it's things that we have in our mind that we feel obsessed, that we feel that we have to think about. So a lot of times it's a worst case scenario, and there's a lot of anxiety involved in it. And in order to relieve our anxiety, we have to do compulsions, right? So it's things that we relieve our anxiety in the short term, but actually reinforce it in the long term. So we have to rely on these compulsions to actually reduce anxiety. So I guess for me, I've talked about it before, but my OCD symptom is actually going to the toilet a lot. Yeah, so going to pee, even when there's not much inside. And that problem can be so bad that sometimes even before I sleep, it can go for up to 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. So so that's why I say OCD can be about anything actually. Yeah.
Wow. So that means like anyone could have it, given that they're obsessive over a particular thing, anything, whether it's eating,
Yeah,
whether
100%.
it's
Uh, there's eating, there's stuff like about sexuality, there's religion, there's ethical. Honestly, anything you could think about that people do, it could be a form of OCD. There's worrying, there's a lot of different fears and phobias. Yeah, anything could be OCD
so
actually. Yeah.
from what I understand, hearing this from you, once you're diagnosed, there's the basic of being diagnosed with OCD, and then there's the
Mhm.
individual situation and problem that each person has that has to be dealt with, which
Yes. So yeah. So basically, like there's different scales. There's one famous one called the Yale Brown OCD scale. So that kind of takes into account different forms of OCD, the different like obsessions and compulsions. But yeah, that's really a non-exhaustive list where the overall term of OCD can be diagnosed, but the specifics of it is different for every individual.
so for someone who might not know that they have OCD, what are the simple sort of things that they can pay attention to and realize, oh,
Mm,
this is OCD, like just basic, like if
right,
they're
right. Yeah. So really it comes down to is that are there actions that you do over and over again that you feel like you have to do
mm,
when you realize that even in your head, right, you know that it's irrational or illogical. Yeah, because there's a difference between OCD, which is an anxiety disorder, and OCPD, which is a personality disorder. And the difference between the two is that people with OCD know that it's irrational, and they know that it's logical, but they still do it. But for OCPD, they think that, oh, this makes perfect sense. right? Let's say someone washes their laundry like 100 times. No, it's fine because I'm doing it. That's because it's clean. So that's more likely to be OCPD because they think that it's logical. Does it make sense?
I'm trying to follow along. So basically,
Yeah.
like if it's OCD, it's somewhat subconscious that you're constantly doing the same things over and over and over and over.
Mm.
Whereas like if you're doing things consciously over and over, it's like you know you're doing it, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
something like that. Something like that. It's because OCD feels like a lot of people describe it as a prison or
Mm.
being trapped because you know that what you're doing is not useful or illogical, but you still feel like you have to do it anyway. So yeah, that's kind of like a very good way to describe it for anyone that because OCD actions can be anything, right? And the stereotype of it is that it has to be germophobia or being so clean and obsessive when even for me that I'm actually quite a messy person, a disorganized person. So I'm the opposite of the stereotype of OCD. So yeah, so that's why like it's kind of good to maybe dissolve some of these stereotypes involving these specific mental disorders. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand it from in a simple way, so
Right.
that if there's people out there who might not know, then basically they're, oh, okay, then this is not normal for me.
Mm.
This might be something I need to look into. From what I understand, hearing you out is if it becomes a situation where it affects your life and your livelihood, then that's something that you should look into.
Yep. And really the clinical diagnosis of it involves most of the time it because there's OC, most people have obsessive compulsive traits, right? But it's not necessarily a disorder. A disorder only comes when it really affects your life. And most of the time it kind of takes away your time. I believe the number is I think 1 to 2 hours every day. Yeah. So if you're doing actions that you feel are irrational or illogical and really takes up a lot of your time or affects your social life, your relationships, or your work, then I think that's something to be worth looking into.
Thanks for sharing that, Ron. Um,
Mm.
but with Singapore, like the
Yeah.
environment, 'cause I used to live in Singapore, the environment, I mean, I remember being there pre-pandemic, and sometimes
Mm.
I even felt a bit claustrophobic at times where I felt I needed
Uh,
to kind of, fly out or kind of cross over somewhere
no,
because
no,
like,
that's you just described the average Singaporean mindset.
okay, so I guess
And
like
I need to
basically
fly away. I need to, yeah.
so basically, I guess I want what I was planning to ask you is I'm actually answering it myself because I used to live there myself. But I guess like from a different aspect where you were born there and you lived there since you were,
Mm,
since you were little. For myself, I only lived there a couple of years. So
mm,
what are the obstacles that you find in terms of mental health living in an environment where it's a fairly new country,
mm.
and the
Yep.
and it's the population's a lot smaller than a lot of countries, like globally it's a
Yep.
very, yeah.
Yeah.
So is there more obstacles you find?
Right. So I guess to answer your question, definitely there is, but I guess the first thing that I'll say is that in recent years it's definitely gotten much better. Yeah. Really that there's a huge spearheaded campaign by the government, by society, to really put a lot of emphasis on mental health. Recently I was at a session with TikTok and they were having a youth for good session. So that they brought one of the MPs over there to talk about mental health and just to have that destigmatizing conversation, right, was actually kind of a powerful thing. But really, I guess there's a few obstacles that still stand. Despite stuff like there's like a lot of like promotions by let's say the health promotion board to reach out to people. So those are really kind of top down, I guess like campaigns or efforts. But I guess one thing for me is so there's the usual conversation around Asian societies or like the stigma around reaching out, the taboo of reaching out, even within families, it's kind of like why are you telling me this kind of thing? And so that's one thing, right? So the whole like Asian family stoicism kind of like stereotype. I do think that it's quite a real thing. Yeah, still, it's not really so much an older generation or younger generation thing, but more that it's kind of like a family cycle in a sense. So there are still some families out there who do kind of perpetuate that cycle of not being able to reach out not having to being able to communicate their feelings, stuff like that. But more so is the fact that we're making so much content, right? We're spreading so much advocacy, and we're doing so much good stuff. But even for me, when I make content, I feel that the content I'm making only goes out to people who are interested in mental health, and not so much the people who, I guess, need to see it or need to hear it, where the people who are not really interested in mental health. And there's still a segment of the population. I don't think it's a Singapore thing, but there's still a segment of the population that still doesn't believe in mental health, right? The first TikTok I made, because TikTok goes out to your local country, right? I got comments like, "Oh, depression isn't real, just suck it up," or like, yeah, it's really weird because the person was saying, "Oh, go see a therapist. Your depression isn't real." That doesn't make sense because people go to therapy for their depression. Yeah. So I get comments on that quite frequently. I see comments like that a lot in the comment sections of the newspapers and stuff. So yeah, it's the fact that there's a whole segment of the population that still isn't taken into the message that mental health is important, or the mental health is health. And it's still a conversation of how do we get to these people? How do we get the message to these people? Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense because I feel we're living in very like it's accelerated
Right.
times in terms of like social media, accelerated times with people being able to attain information really quickly,
Mm,
accelerated times where people are coming out and being comfortable to show who they are and what
yeah.
situations they might be in. But then when you have that, it's a lot of having to kind of go through uh, what it is that works for you, doesn't work for you,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
what's real, what's not real. There's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of fake.
Yeah.
At the same time, um, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of truths. There's a lot of like I think there's just like a lot of things that's going on. So we're just in really accelerated times, and that's why everyone has a say or has an
Exactly.
opinion. And I think that's kind of like there's always pros and cons. The pros of it is the fact that there's a lot of people out there who don't have an outlet and they don't
Mm-hmm.
know where to they don't have a reach. It's like then they have social media where they're able to
Exactly.
pick and choose. So that's my like thoughts on it like right now.
Yeah, yeah. So on mine, what I feel is that this whole conversation around fake news and misinformation is that people gravitate to the content that they feel is the truth, regardless of whether it's actually the truth, right? So in some sense, they look for the content that I guess confirms their bias, right? So they look for and how the algorithms work is that they continuously give them the content that they're seeking, right? Whether it's regardless of whether it's true or not. So in that sense, people's beliefs are reinforced. And so, I mean, the whole question is how do you get the right information to them, right? So people are empowered, especially by the anonymity of social media. In fact, most of negative comments actually come from people with like faceless avatars, right? And yeah, they know that they know they can do that because they know that they can get away with it. Uh, so yeah, it's a question of how do we get these people to kind of hone into the right information. So yeah, that's just another conversation altogether.
So how would you I mean best answer this question where
Mm.
as a writer, advocate, content creator in
Mm-hmm.
mental health, but if you're not certified,
Right.
there's a lot of different content out there and content creators, and as someone who is trying to reach out and understand their mental health, um, what how could you give that comfort that that comfort to a person about whether they're getting the right advice from the right person?
Got it. Got it. So, yeah, so that's a really good question. It's been something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of my own responsibilities as a content creator, someone who has a platform, right? So I think first thing is that I would say that I am kind of certified in a sense because I do have a postgraduate degree or certification in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the main CBT methods. So I do have training, but don't call myself like a counselor or a professional because I feel as if you really do need let's say a master's degree or to be registered to call yourself that. Which is also the same reason why I don't give mental health services, for example. So I guess really to the first thing that I should say is that mental health content, there's good and there's bad, right? So the good we've talked about already, but the bad, there's actually quite a few, right? We mentioned misinformation, and that misinformation can lead to several consequences, including, let's say, people self-diagnosing themselves wrongly, right? Or people who romanticize mental illnesses. Oh, like depression is so cool, or I'm like, oh, it's so in trend to have this mental illness right now. And also people who, and I've been noticing this, where people who kind of stay at where they're at, so they're only consuming content that tells them about how bad their life is, and less so about how to get out of that situation. Right. So these are kind of like the trifecta of bad effects of mental health content, right? So really the first thing that comes down to it is the question of what do you need to make content, right? Because in my opinion, I think people in general don't need certification to make content, to share content, right? So to qualify that, it's that I definitely do think that people need certification or degree to provide services. Yeah, to kind of, or even help people in general through like the DMs and stuff, because if you say the wrong thing, then there might be consequences over there. But to say that, and I have received comments like these where, oh, where's your certification? You have no right to be making content, right? And kind of we're getting into that conversation where, if you take that to the extreme, you're kind of saying that if you're a survivor, right? Even if you have like lived experience and years of dealing with a condition, that you don't have the right to make that content if you don't have the certification, right? So I don't believe that piece of paper has so much power in allowing you to speak your voice and be free about, let's say, talking about what has helped you in your journey. That being said, there's certain things that we kind of have to kind of like tell people before they consume mental health content, and things that we have, as you mentioned, like what should we say to people to help them get a better sense of like the person that they are seeking help from, are they kind of like legit or not, to put it that way.
So from what I'm hearing, basically as an audience or someone who's looking for some sort of help, you need to be able to, whether it's someone who's certified or not certified, a content creator or someone who's certified in mental health, you should do a background check, like sort of like your own like personal background check to check through their like if it's a content creator, like through their content, through their what they're representing, what they're saying, or even like because I see it both ways too. I think like a lot on the other side of it, even with certification, sometimes it can be misused as well.
Definitely.
So it's like you can see it both ways. I just think it's it's something that needs to be debated. I think as a content creator, I do agree with you. It's separate from being certified or not certified, because as a content creator, you're telling your story and you're bringing out to the social media sphere about your story to relay what could be what could resonate and help others. And then on top of that, if you have a responsibility on top of that, then as a content creator, you're going to be responsible about what you are relaying. But I guess like from my side, I guess like for the average person who might not be able to delve deep into figuring out all these things, how do they know whether or not they are getting the right help or
the right information?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which I guess like it comes down to just being able to have a lot of options for yourself and see which ones seem to be the most truthful and certified.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think one thing also you mentioned is that, which is true, a lot of times like the certification, sometimes people do make it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Right. So that's a huge source of misinformation there too. And people kind of abuse that, especially when they're anonymous and they can just say, "Oh, I'm a professional," and that may not actually be the case. But really to answer your question, there's a few things that people can do, right? So running background checks is one. Second thing is whenever there's this conversation about, let's say, mental illnesses, or like let's say the symptoms of mental illnesses, or how to deal with it, always look at and always check if the content actually lists sources. Yeah. So
Mm.
sources, especially like anything medical related, should come from a reputable article or a reputable journal. That's something that I try to do whenever I refer to sources. So that's one thing. Second thing, something I like to say is like check whether the advice that they're giving, right, is presented in a way that is it personal, or is it personal advice, or is it personal advice that's disguised as objective advice, right? Okay, so to kind of be clear with that, it's perfectly okay to say that oh, this is how this has helped me, right? Let's say taking walks has really helped me, but it's another thing to say that taking walks definitely will help you, because in that sense you are phrasing a personal advice as objective advice. Does that make sense? So
It makes perfect sense because basically it's whether you're telling a person to do something or
right,
you're relaying something that comes from your personal experience and relaying
correct.
that this might help you because it
Yeah,
has helped me.
yeah. So yeah, one funny story is that I was looking at so there's this person who was talking about anxiety, right? And they were saying that, oh, actually meditating and taking walks doesn't help with your anxiety. And I was like, very interesting. So then they're saying, oh, what actually does help me with my anxiety is things that distract me a lot. So one of the things was like masturbation. And he was saying that, oh, this like will definitely help you. This is the best thing to ever like. And I'm happy that it helped you, right? But to say that it will definitely help you, or that it's the best thing in the world, it's even better than meditation and mindfulness and all these other like things that have helped a lot of people, right? Number one, it's false. And number two, it is yeah, like I said, you're disguising the personal as objective. Yeah, and that's a huge thing to take note of when it comes to people giving advice on the internet. Yes, last thing very briefly is to actually check whether the person is being sponsored by anyone. Yeah, so if they're being
Mm.
sponsored, yeah, obviously there's a message. Maybe yeah, they have to push a certain message in order to kind of fulfill that contractual obligation. So yeah, keep in mind, just have a check whether the person is sponsored by anything.
But
Yeah.
when we were offline, we were discussing the fact that it's all types of content that's out there, not just mental health content. It's like
Mm,
every type of content under the sun. You need to be able to check the sources and make sure what you're reading or what you're absorbing are the right, information because a lot of times people tend to just read what's on the surface and then believe what they see. I think it's still a stigma in terms of like, a lot of things aren't said in families because I think overall, like, in Asian society, it's not a very like intimate society. So as in like
mm,
you don't hug, it's not like Western
indeed.
society where like you see people and you give hugs, you give kisses. It's like I mean, it's starting to change with the new generation, but as a whole, or the basic or the foundation, and a lot of
Mm,
things is kind of like it's that Asian tiger sort of like, like you
definitely.
have to toughen up and
Yeah.
and if you're more tough, you'll get over it. But actually, it's actually the opposite because you're um you're sweeping
Yeah.
everything under the carpet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Definitely. And yeah, there's this whole idea of that the human body or the human mind wasn't built to suppress emotions, it was built to release them.
Mm.
Yeah. So stuff like talking about it, doing stuff like writing it out, sustainable exercise, it's all like really helpful. And going back to the Asian kind of context, right? What I've realized is that the issue of and I guess it's a broad stroke, but the issue of emotional neglect, yeah, is more common than we think, where we don't talk to each other so much that we get used to not talking about our feelings.
Mm.
Yeah. And as a result, even me, a lot of people that I know, they have issues, or let's say even when they're talking about their issues or feelings, right? They feel a bit shameful, they feel a bit guilty. right? That I shouldn't be talking about that. I should be just dealing with it myself. When in reality, how I would say is that uh, asking for help and reaching out is actually not a sign of vulnerability. It's a sign of strength. Yeah. It's a sign that you know when to seek help and you know when you can't deal with it by yourself. Yeah. So this whole idea of like, oh, suck it up and stuff like that, it can work for you in the short term, but in the long term, if you suppress your emotions too much, it's going to create some issues down the road. Yeah.
It's definitely having outlets too. I like my personal sort of um story that I can share is like I remember when certain times my outlet would be to write. So I would write
Mm-hmm.
like poems. But then being of an
Send me some. Send me some. Yeah, I'm
but
interested to hear
sure.
them.
And now I'm at a place where I'm comfortable to say that. But I remember coming from generations before pre-social media and then pre being who you are and what you do and having different types of outlet is like actually fine. I
Mm-hmm.
think I grew up in a generation where it's like, is this no like this could look not normal to write poems um
Mm-hmm.
and like
Yeah,
and
I get what you
express
mean.
yourself like by writing. It can look feminine, or it can look like, oh, only like
Yeah.
girls do that, back then.
Yeah.
So it's like then I stopped writing because I thought, oh, okay, well, you have to fall into this like, the stereotypical, well, like sports and I gotta do
Mm-hmm.
this, I gotta do that. Now I realize like, but we're in the new generation now. It's like um the more who you are, the more authentic you are. So like
Definitely.
I'm sharing that like little tidbit about myself where that was my outlet. And everyone has a sort like they have their individual outlet, but that helped a lot
Right.
because I'm able to kind of just write and be creative and then release it in my own way. And
Mm.
I think that needs to be more conveyed out there, that it's okay to just have your outlets, whatever it is. That's healthy. That's healthy.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And I don't know, like it all comes together where like, the focus on like studies and achievements kind of prevents people from discovering their outlet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhat. So yeah, it's I don't know. PSA to all parents watching this. Yeah. Give your children time to explore their creativity, explore their outlets, and yeah, they'll thank you for it like, in the future.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, Ron. I'm sure we're going to be having many more talks in the future.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm looking forward to them. Yeah. Thank you for this talk.
All
Yeah.
right. You have a good day. Bye.
Bye.